Okay, Facebook and Twitter fans, we're in the studio right now, over 2 hours into actually covering this earthquake that happened in Virginia.
Hi.
Cecily's here as well, and this man right here, Paul Trimbello. Oh, you're sweaty, Paul. Working very hard. He's a meteorologist here behind the scenes, and he's making the graphics here for us, Cecily and them, looking up some of the information. Cecily updating the website, and Cecily's been finding some really unique information about this earthquake, how rare it is, when the last one occurred, how there's seismic zones in Virginia that we didn't even know.
Yeah,
I didn't even know.
you know, you don't think of Virginia being a hot spot for hurricanes.
We're still talking about hurricanes too.
For earthquakes, they're certainly not as often as the West Coast, but something about the East Coast is that because of the topography, because of the bedrock underneath the soil, an earthquake is felt a lot farther than in the West Coast. So that's why people went in Ottawa and New York and Philly.
Outer Banks in North Carolina felt it. So it is pretty unique, and reading all the comments also on my Facebook page, my Twitter page, trying to get through them all. There's so many. I'm inundated with it, but it's great to hear from you. We're going back on the air now. Brian and Charlene about to go back on the air. I'll be on soon enough as well. And thank you all very much for giving your input on this earthquake. Let me tell you, it was pretty bizarre to feel the ground shake. We'll see you on Action News.
David Henry, live once again in Center City. And David, you are still outside Hahnemann Hospital, where I gather people are still wondering what the heck just happened.
Yeah, they are, Brian. A lot of people were in here for procedures, visiting sick relatives and so forth, and they were completely startled by the building starting to move. It disrupted some of the medical equipment, so some frightening moments here. People in Center City, like this young lady, you were sitting at your desk, and what did you feel?
Yes, I was down at the building, the probation building, and I was sitting at the desk, and the computer started shaking, and I didn't know what it was. But somebody told me it was an earthquake, and we had to evacuate the building, so we had to walk down 14 flights of stairs. So that was my first experience. I never felt that before.
You don't want to do it again?
No, that was scary. Yeah. It was very scary.
Yeah, it's scary for a lot of folks around here because Philadelphia doesn't experience many earthquakes, and nobody has any real knowledge of how to react when something like that happens, because we don't get warned about it like they do in places like California. Ms. Brooks here was in for a procedure. Pat, what happened to you?
I was coming from under the machine. I was taking, they was giving me a test for my heart, and I was set up. And I heard the machine start to shake, and I said, well, what's going on? Michael Jackson was on the radio singing Thriller, and then I sat up, and after things started to shake, and I thought it was the machine, and then the nurses came in and said, we just had an earthquake. I said, oh my God.
Did you ever feel the earth move under your feet?
Yeah, no, I was sitting up. I was sitting up on the machine when it done it.
All right.
I was sitting up on the machine, and it started shaking.
Pretty scary moment. We talked to some other folks a little bit earlier out here. They all came out of this tall building at Hahnemann University Hospital worried about what might happen next. Here's what some of them had to say a little bit earlier.
I thought my husband was having a seizure. I didn't really realize what was happening at the time.
What did you feel, Loretta?
Well, I was sitting in the chair, and all of a sudden it started vibrating. Couldn't imagine what that was, and then a piece of equipment fell down and hit the chair.
Trying to get out.
But everybody was headed towards the entrances and the exits.
So you all came out.
I was very scared. I just didn't know what was going on. It was a weird feeling. First, it rattled, and then it paused for a second, then it did it again. And I'm like, oh my God, it shook twice. So I was really scared. I just can't think of nothing but to get home right now to my kids.
Well, there you have a sampling of what some of the folks here experienced earlier today. A lot of emergency personnel were on the scene here at Hahnemann University Hospital just in case something might happen. Fortunately, nothing did, and we are hearing that there were no injuries or serious health-threatening disruptions of services here at the hospital. A minor tremor here in Philadelphia, more severe closer to the epicenter, but enough to shake a lot of people out of their chairs, out of their beds. In fact, we talked to one geology student at Temple University Hospital who was at home, and he got shaken out of his bed. But a great experience for him because he's studying this stuff, and he got to experience it firsthand. Live in Center City, David Henry, Channel 6 Action News.
It happened at 1:50 this afternoon. Workers in Center City, Philadelphia came streaming out of their high-rise offices to the streets below after feeling the earth move. Yes, Virginia, that was an earthquake. In fact, it was epicentered in Virginia. but clearly felt in the Philadelphia area. And this was a similar scene in Washington, just 83 miles from the quake's epicenter. Office and government workers gathered on the streets of the nation's capital, and they felt it too in New York, the city of skyscrapers. The East Coast, not normally the natural landscape for tremors and tremblers, but it did some shaking today. Tuesday night, the big story on Action News tonight is the latest on today's earthquake that shook from the East Coast, from North Carolina to Massachusetts. There have been no major reports of damage or injuries, but with millions of people in position to feel the shaking, there are a lot of nerves still being unfrayed at this hour. Let's get right to meteorologist Cecily Tynan at the Action News Big Board. Cecily, you can show us exactly where the earth moved and the enormous range of the vibrations.
That's right, Jim. The earthquake struck at 1:51 this afternoon. The epicenter 5 miles southwest of the small town of Mineral, Virginia. That's about 40 miles northwest of Richmond. It lasted 30 to 45 seconds. A 5.8 magnitude on the Richter scale, about a half mile below the surface of the ground. Now, 3D can show you the enormous scope of where the tremors were felt. On the East Coast, we have bedrock below the surface, and that's like concrete. So the tremors are really thrown across a very large area from Canada all the way down to North Carolina. That's close to 800 miles where people could feel that earthquake. And I want to show you, Virginia is not on a fault line, but there are seismic centers. The Central Virginia Seismic Zone, it's right here. That's where today's earthquake, the last big earthquake to hit Virginia, was over here, the Giles County Seismic Zone. That was back in 1897, also 5.8 on the Richter scale. And this is really interesting. This is from Millersville, Virginia. This is a seismograph. I know I'm getting wrapped, but I want to show you this. This line right there, this is right before 2 o'clock. Going crazy here. So this is the seismograph in Lancaster County showing what was being felt here.
The time was 1:51 and the White House started shaking to the point that Secret Service agents up on the roof started moving quickly to see what was going on. In Wilmington, Delaware, employees ran out of a warehouse after they felt it. And in Washington, cameras were rolling in the studios of CNN and Espanol when the set started losing its cool. And this is how it looked inside a store in Mineral, Virginia, which happened to be the epicenter. Tens of millions of people felt an earthquake for the first time today. It is usually a West Coast phenomenon, but not today, and it happened in our backyard. It is Tuesday night, and the big story on Action News tonight is the aftermath of an earthquake, and this is how it looked on the streets of Philadelphia. Thousands of workers bolted from their high-rise offices and congregated on the streets, all anxious to hear it from someone else. Yes, that must have been an earthquake, and indeed it was. The epicenter, Mineral, Virginia. The quake registered 5.8 on the Richter scale. The closest major city to the epicenter, Richmond, Virginia, and Washington, but 83 miles away. The actual vibrations of the quake took 48.8 seconds to travel to Philadelphia. The town building in Mineral, Virginia sustained a fair amount of damage with broken glass and collapsed bricks. It may not look like much, but the fact is this was the strongest earthquake to strike the East Coast since World War II. There have been no reports of injuries anywhere, but there may still be some frayed nerves tonight. How about this? Just minutes ago, officials in Washington confirmed that the Washington Monument will be closed indefinitely because engineers found cracks near the top of the column during inspections late today. Other monuments in the Capitol were also inspected and are all expected to be open tomorrow. Perhaps the best-known building to sustain damage today was the National Cathedral in Washington. 3 capstones broke off the main tower, and cracks appeared in the flying buttresses around the apse at the cathedral's east end. That is the oldest part of the building. On the cathedral website, the message, "Please pray for the cathedral as there has been some damage." Action News happened to be shooting video in the Philadelphia Eagles locker room at the NovaCare Center, and both players and members of the media were stopped in their tracks by the quake. It is normally pretty tough to impress this group, but an earthquake will do that. That is Action News viewer Brian Kushner of Audubon, New Jersey, who sent us this clip of video. You can hear his garage doors banging and the building rattling. There was no major damage here, fortunately. In Camden, New Jersey, a vacant building on Walnut Street collapsed onto the kitchen area of an occupied home next door. The walls in the back of the house crumbled to the ground. Police had to block off the scene. As far as we know, no one was hurt in Camden. The Office of Emergency Management in Burlington, New Jersey, had structural engineers out doing inspections. They found damaged chimneys and minor damage to structures, but nothing major. The historic Temple Beth Israel, make that B'nai Israel synagogue on High Street, got the worst of it. It was built in 1801. In Camden, police blocked off the main entrance to Our Lady of Lourdes Hospital because of fears that the quake may have loosened a statue of the Blessed Virgin Mary that has sat atop the building for 60 years. The hospital is operating normally, but inspections of the statue will be done tomorrow. The quake is also being blamed for damaging a historic building in downtown Woodbury, Gloucester County. Bricks came loose and a crack developed in the old G.G. Green building on Broad Street. Fortunately, there were no injuries here either. Switch live to Action News reporter Kenneth Moten, who is on Market Street in Center City. Kenneth, how did the earthquake play out there today?
Jim, no injuries and only minor damage. It looks like Center City lucked out. People walked out onto these streets and they were all having the same conversations and asking the same questions. Where were you and did you feel it? It was the 30-second sway felt across Center City.
There was this big movement. First I thought it was just the floor shaking.
And no matter where they were.
I was on the 28th floor.
I work on the 30th floor.
I was on the 35th floor. Workers in high-rise office and residential buildings couldn't wait to get out. Chopper 6 was overhead as large crowds of people made their way out onto the sidewalks. At the Independence Blue Cross building at 19th and Market Streets, emergency crews arrived to inspect it and this window. This was the only visible sign of damage we could find from the earthquake.
Hey, it was kind of weird. The whole building, the walls were shaking, the cubicles were shaking, everything was shaking around. It was just felt like somebody was moving something heavy on the floor above you.
Most people decided to call it a day, too nervous to go back inside these tall buildings.
I wasn't sure whether or not they was going to keep going or if there were going to be after effects or aftershocks. So at that point, we just decided, it's time to leave.
So many in our area felt something, but surprisingly, there are probably just as many who didn't feel one tremor. But you didn't feel it. How?
I don't know. I feel like I missed out on something.
Allison Cranage was on the top floor of her home in Havertown, and her friend was shopping in Newtown. But it didn't take them long to find out what was going on thanks to social media.
Everyone's Facebook is like, earthquake, earthquake. The whole house is swaying, and I felt nothing. I was in the mall.
Not a bad place to be. Mayor Nutter and the police commissioner can join that list of people who didn't feel anything. They were having a news conference in Southwest Philadelphia when their pagers and phones started going off. The mayor also says 311 will be taking calls for another hour if residents have questions about this earthquake and also if they need to report any infrastructure problems. Reporting live in Center City, Kenneth Moten, Channel 6, Action News.
And there don't appear to be any. Thank you.